Hey guys! Tonight, you're going to spend one whole winter day inside a small wooden house on the Dakota Prairie. In the deep middle of the winter of 1881, standing in the shoes of the woman who kept 5 people alive at 40 below zero, one ordinary day at a time. Her name is Caroline. Her children call her Ma. And by the time we let the last little flame go out tonight, you may find yourself looking at your own warm, humming, effortless house, the way you'd look at something close to a miracle. There's a coffee mill in this story, a little wooden box with a hand crank, the kind that used to sit on every kitchen shelf in the country. Only this winter, there's no coffee to put in it. There has been no coffee for weeks. What goes into that little mill now is wheat, hard seed wheat meant for spring planting, and what comes out of it, a slow spoonful at a time, is the only bread this family has. Keep half an ear on that mill as we go. It's going to turn all day. Before we settle in properly, a tiny bit of housekeeping, and then I'll leave you in peace. If you enjoy slow, quiet history at the end of a long day, the kind you're allowed to fall asleep inside without missing anything at all, then go ahead and subscribe, but only if you genuinely like what I make here. No pressure either way, ever. And I'd love it if you told me, down in the comments, where you're listening from tonight, and what time it's where you're. There's something quietly lovely about seeing who else is out there in the dark, drifting off at the same moment as you. If you'd rather take this one with the screen off, it lives on Spotify too under the same name. No rush, it'll be there whenever you want it. So, dim the light, turn the fan on if a bit of hush helps you. Pull the blanket up under your chin and let yourself get heavy and slow. If you fall asleep partway through all of this and never once hear how the day ends, that isn't a failure. That's exactly what this is for. I'll keep watch over all of it. We're going to follow this one woman all the way from the black cold of 4 a.m. to the last small light carried up the stairs at night, and you won't have to hold on to a single fact to come along with me. And somewhere in the white middle of that day, 2 young men will do a brave and slightly foolish thing this town will still be telling stories about 50 years on, though she won't know it while it happens. The morning, though, has work in it first. Take a slow breath. The air you're breathing now is thin and sharp and edged with wood smoke, because tonight you don't live in your own time at all. Tonight you live in a young little town called Smet, a handful of raw new buildings standing alone on a great white plain in Dakota Territory. And this is the winter that the people who lived through it would still be describing in careful detail half a century later to anyone who would sit still and listen. Let's begin where she begins, in the dark. It's a little before 4 a.m, and you're awake before you decide to be. It's the first thing to understand about being Caroline this winter. The waking isn't gentle. There's no grey light easing in at the window, no soft grade from sleep into morning. There's only the cold reaching into the warm hollow of the bed and touching your face, and some deep old instinct in you that counts the hours even while you sleep and knows, without a clock, that it's time. You lie still for one moment longer. Beside you, Charles is a warm weight under the quilts, breathing slow. The children are somewhere behind you in the dark, a soft tangle of breath and blanket. For that one moment, everything is warm and everything is enough and you don't have to move. Then you move. You slide out from under the covers into air so cold it has a taste to it, a flat iron taste, like a spoon held too long in your mouth. Your bare feet find the floor and the floor is a shock colder than the air, and you stand for a second with your arms wrapped around yourself while the cold decides what it thinks of you. The house is black, not dim, black, the pure, lightless black of a winter before there was such a thing as a switch on the wall, and you cross the room by memory, by the map of it worn into your feet, one hand out for the shape of the stove. The stove is the centre of everything now. In a warm month you might not give it a thought, but this isn't a warm month, and the stove is the difference between one kind of morning and another kind entirely. You crouch in front of it and open the little iron door, and there, down in the ash, is the thing you were hoping for. A dull red glow, a few coals banked under a grey blanket of ash the night before, kept alive through all those black hours by nothing but your care and a little luck. They're still breathing. You breathe back. You feed them the way you'd feed something small and half wild that might startle. A twist of dry hay first, laid down light. A breath, low and steady, from the side. The red brightens, considers, and then catches, and a small clean flame stands up in the dark and throws the first light of your day across the floor and up the wall. There's the room, come back out of the black, the table, the shelf, the window, still a square of pure night. And your own breath, hanging in the air in front of you in a little cloud, because it's nearly as cold inside this room as it's outside, and outside this morning, it's somewhere down past 30 below. Some mornings that winter it went lower than any thermometer in town could follow, so low the mercury shrank into the bulb and simply gave up, and folks stopped asking the exact number and just called it what it was, which was killing cold. You don't have kerosene for the lamp, that went weeks ago, along with so much else. So the light you work by is a small invention of your own, and here I have a real soft spot for Carolyn, because this is the kind of thing she was quietly brilliant at. You take a shallow dish and a scrap of soft cloth and a button, an ordinary little button from the sewing box. You wrap the cloth around the button so a small peak of it stands up like a wick. You set it in the dish, and you cover the bottom with a bit of soft axle grease, the thick grey grease meant for wagon wheels. Touch a flame to the peak of cloth, and the grease begins to melt, and the melting grease climbs the cloth and it burns. It burns small and steady and yellow, no bigger than the flame on a candle, and it cost you nothing but a button you'll get back in the morning. A button lamp, they called it. In a winter that had taken the coal, the kerosene, the flour and the trains, your light comes from a button and a bit of soft grease, and it's enough to see by. It's astonishing what turns out to be enough, when there's nothing else. No switch on a wall to fail you, nothing to plug in, no little standby light glowing in the corner to promise you the power is still on. Just a button, a spoonful of grease, and a woman who thought of it. Somewhere in your own house tonight, a dozen small lights are burning for no reason at all, and not one of them cost you a moment's thought. Hers cost her a button, and she'll want it back by morning. By that small light, you begin. There's a bucket of water in the corner, or there was water in it last night, and this morning there's a lid of ice across the top of it, thick enough that you have to break it with the dipper. The sound of it's loud in the quiet house, a dull crack, and under the broken ice the water is so cold it aches in the bones of your hand. You dip out just what you need, and no more. Everything, this winter, is pared down to exactly that. You've learned the exact size of enough, the way most people learn a face, and nothing here gets wasted, not a spoonful, because there's no more coming. Not this week. Perhaps not for many weeks. The trains are stopped somewhere back east under snow you can't picture, and until they run again, the whole town lives on precisely what it already has. You warm your hands a moment at the little fire before it can spare no more heat for hands. On the wall beside you, the frost has drawn its feathers again, the way it does every night. It creeps out from the nail heads in delicate white stars. It laces along the seams of the boards. It stands in soft fur on the head of every nail. And if the day ever warmed enough, it would melt and run and stain the wood. But the day won't warm enough, so it simply stays growing. You have long since stopped seeing it as strange. Frost on the inside of your own walls is just the weather now, the way rain on the outside is weather in a gentler place. You give it no more thought than that. And on the shelf, waiting, is the little coffee mill. You'll come to it soon. You always do, but not yet. First the fire has to gather its strength. First the worst of the chill has to be pushed back into the corners. First there's water to warm and a household still sleeping to keep asleep a little longer, because the longer they sleep, the less they're cold, and the less they're cold, the less of everything they need. So you stand for a moment in the small yellow light, with the fire ticking and growing beside you, and the frost feathers white on the wall, and 5 people breathing soft and safe in the dark behind you, and the whole enormous frozen night pressing in against the thin wooden walls of the house. And you're the only one awake in it. You and the fire and the cold, keeping their old arrangement, the one you renew before dawn, one morning after another. The fire settles into itself. The room by degrees grows bearable, and outside the black begins its slow thinning toward grey. You won't get much day for all this work. That's one of the quiet cruelties of a northern winter, that the days themselves grow thin just when you need them most, and you learn to spend the little light you're given like the precious thing it's. The sun, when it comes at all, comes late and comes low. It heaves itself up over the flat white edge of the world well after you have already been working for hours by the button lamp, and it never climbs far, just rolls along low above the horizon, pale and distant and strangely cold, a sun you can very nearly look straight at, giving light without much warmth, as though it too were rationing what it had. And then, almost before it has properly arrived, it's sliding back down the other side, and the long blue shadows stretch out across the snow, and the brief thin day is folding up again into dark. By the middle of the afternoon the light is already going. By what you'd call supper time in a kinder season, it's full night. You get, in the deep of this winter, only a short handful of real daylight hours out of every turning of the clock, a narrow bright window set in a great deal of dark, and everything that truly needs the light has to be crowded into it. So you work by that small burning button at both ends of the day, in the black morning and the black evening, and you save the true daylight, what there's of it, for the things that most need seeing. The rest of the time you live by that one poor flame and by the red glow of the stove, in a kind of perpetual gentle dusk, and it does something to a person, all that dark, month upon month of it, the light coming so briefly and leaving so soon. It could sink the spirits if you let it. It has sunk many, and so you do the thing you always do, which is to make the little pools of warm light as bright and as good as you can, to gather the family into them of an evening, to fill the dark not with dread but with voices and warmth and the smell of bread, until the long night outside becomes almost cosy, almost chosen, a thing you're nested inside rather than lost within. The dark is very large out here. You can't make it smaller. You can only make the light kind, and keep everyone gathered close inside it, and let the darkness have the rest. Now the fire has its strength, and the room has given up its worst, and there's no putting it off any longer. You go to the shelf and take down the little coffee mill. It's a small thing to carry so much. A square wooden box that sits in the palms of your two hands, with a little iron hopper on the top and a crank on the side and a shallow drawer in the bottom, to catch what falls. It was made for pleasure, this mill, not for survival. It was made for a woman to grind a small handful of dark, oily coffee beans on a Sunday, for the good smell of it, and a treat after supper. Nobody who built it ever dreamed of what you're about to ask of it. But the flour ran out and the store had no more, and the trains that would have brought more are sitting still under the snow, and so this little pleasure box has quietly become the flour mill for a household of 7. It's the smallest gristmill on the northern plains, and it lives on your kitchen shelf, and without it none of you'd eat bread at all. There's a machine on a counter somewhere in your life that would do a whole day of this grinding in under a minute, humming to itself while you left the room and forgot about it. She can't leave the room. She's the machine, and the motor, and the switch that shuts it off, and the only thing standing between a bowl of hard wheat and a child who has to be fed. You pour a scant handful of wheat into the hopper. Hard amber grains, each one meant to go into the spring ground and become a field. This is seed wheat, bought in a sack, the last grain in town that anyone could spare, and every kernel you grind today is a kernel that won't be planted come spring. You don't let yourself think too hard about that. Spring is a rumour. This morning is real. You turn the crank. The first turns are the hardest until the grains catch between the little iron burrs inside, and then the mill settles into its work with a low, dry, grinding growl, a sound you could pick out of any noise in the world by now, and down into the drawer sifts a fine fall of pale brown flour. Not white, never white. The seed wheat grinds coarse and speckled, flecked with the brown of the bran, and it'll make a heavy, dark, honest loaf with a crust you have to mean to bite. But it's flour. You turn and turn and turn. Your shoulder knows this motion the way it knows rocking a cradle. The drawer fills by the spoonful, and only by the spoonful, and you begin to understand, if you've never ground your own bread by hand in the cold before, exactly how much turning stands between a bowl of wheat and a single loaf. It's most of an hour of steady grinding to fill the drawer even once. Fill it, empty it into the bowl, fill the hopper again, begin again. To make enough coarse flour for the bread this family eats in one day takes turn after turn after turn, until your arm is a dull warm ache from the shoulder down, and your fingers have gone stiff on the handle. And this next part moves me a little, every time. You don't do all of it alone. In a little while, when the girls are up, the mill will pass from hand to hand around this house all day long. Laura will take her turn and grind until her arm gives out. Carrie will take the little crank in her 10-year-old hands and turn it as long as she can. Even Mary, who can't see the drawer fill, can grind by the feel and the sound of it, sitting close by the stove doing her share in the dark. Whoever in this house isn't twisting hay for the fire is grinding wheat for the bread. So goes the arithmetic of the day. Warmth in one hand, food in the other, and both of them made by turning a crank until you can't feel your fingers. You empty the drawer into the bread bowl. A soft, pale brown drift of flour ground by your own hand in the last of the dark. It isn't much. It's, in fact, the day. You set the mill down for now. Its work only started, and you cover the bowl and set it near the warmth, and the little wooden box waits on the table for the next pair of hands. It won't wait long. Behind you, in the grey that's finally coming up in the window, the house begins to stir. Grinding the wheat is only half of it. A drawer full of coarse brown flour isn't bread, it's the promise of bread, and turning the one into the other is its own slow warm ritual that runs like a thread through the morning. You mix it in the big bread bowl, the flour and the water and the little bit of leavening that makes the difference between bread and a flat, sad brick, and you work it with your hands, and this coarse dark flour doesn't behave the way the fine white flour used to. It's heavier, grittier, more stubborn under the heel of your hand, and it asks more of your tired arms to bring it together into a smooth, heavy dough. Then you set it near the stove, covered warm, and you let it rise, and you go about the 100 other things while it does, and every so often you glance at it the way you glance at a sleeping child, to see how it's coming along. It rises slowly in the cold. Everything is slow in the cold, but it rises, and you shape it into loaves, and you put them into the oven of the stove, that same stove you've been feeding twisted hay all morning, and you bake your daily bread over a fire made of summer grass. Then, for a while, the whole house is filled with the smell of it. I don't think there's a better smell in the world than baking bread, and there's certainly no better one in a cold and frightened house at the far edge of a hard winter. It's warm and round and living. It gets into every corner. It reaches the children wherever they are and turns their heads. And for as long as it lasts, it's the smell of everything being all right. It says the stove is hot and the flour held out, and there will be food today. It says home, plainly and without a word, the way only a few smells can. You bake bread most days, because coarse bread doesn't keep, and it's eaten as fast as you can make it. 5 hungry people and never quite enough, and so the house fills up again and again with that good warm smell. One more small daily miracle worked with your own 2 hands out of ground-up seed and grass fire and patience. The loaves come out dark and dense and honest, and the smell of them is the nearest thing to hope you can actually hold in your hands. The waking of a family is a slow tide, and you have watched it come in 10,000 mornings. First, it's only a change in the breathing, then the small sounds, a sigh, the creak of a rope bed, a child turning over and burrowing deeper against the cold, unwilling. You have a few minutes yet before the cold wins and they surface, and you spend those minutes, as you spend all of them now, usefully, setting the table for breakfast by the small yellow light of the button lamp on the table between the plates. There's a cloth on that table. I want you to notice that because it tells you almost everything about the woman you're being tonight. It would be the easiest thing in the world, in a winter like this one, to let the table go, to let the standard slide, to eat plain and quick and grim, heads down and call it good enough because who is there to see out here at the frozen edge of everything? Caroline doesn't let the table go. There's a cloth laid on it. The plates are set square. When the family gathers, grace will be said. The same words in the same order as on any easy morning of any easy year, and the girls will keep their manners, and the meal, however small, will be a meal, and not just feeding. It isn't about being fussy. It's the opposite of fussy. It's a woman drawing a line quietly with a tablecloth and saying, the winter may have the coal and the flour and the kerosene, but it doesn't get this. It doesn't get us. We're still people here. We still sit down like people. They come to the fire one by one, wrapped in shawls and quilts, hair sleep wild, faces pink with cold. Grace first, most likely, because she's the baby, and the cold frightens her out of bed and straight into the nearest warm lap. Then Carrie, 10 years old and thin as a rail this winter, holding her hands out flat to the stove. Then Laura, 13 and coming up hard on 14, already looking for the work she can do. And Mary, who is 16 now and hasn't seen any of this with her eyes for coming on 2 years, since the fever took her sight when she was 14. Mary comes to the fire by the warmth on her face and the map of the room in her memory, and she sits, and she's calm, and in a while she will hold out her hand for the coffee mill and take her turn like all the rest. Breakfast is bread, coarse brown bread from the little mill, and if there's anything to go on, there's very little, and there's weak tea, and this morning perhaps there are still a few potatoes to share out. Boiled in their skins, one of the last small pleasures of a pantry that's emptying like sand through a fist. You portion it out with a steady hand and a calm face. That calm face isn't an accident either. The children read you the way sailors read the sky, and if you're afraid, they will be afraid, and fear eats more than the body does. So you aren't afraid out loud ever, you're Ma. You set down the bread, you pour the tea, you say the grace, and you make 5 people believe by the plain evidence of your steady hands that this is simply breakfast, and that all is fundamentally well. It's the oldest and hardest work there is, and no one will ever put it in a ledger, and you do it perfectly every single morning, before the sun is even up. The plates go quiet. Outside, at last, a thin grey daylight lies flat and colourless across a world made entirely of snow, and the day, the real work of the day, opens its eyes. On the mornings after a storm, before anything else can happen, there's a door to find. You go to open it, and it won't open. Not because it's locked, but because the whole weight of the night has leaned against it, and the wind has built a wall of snow across the doorway as high as your shoulder, packed so hard by its own force that when you finally shoulder the door a crack and reach a hand into the gap, the snow doesn't give like snow at all. It stands there, a smooth blue-white cliff, holding its shape the way a snowdrift only holds it after a real blizzard has pounded it solid. So the day begins, as so many winter days out here begin, with digging, not the soft, fluffy shoveling of a Christmas card. This is hard labour against a thing that fights back, cutting into wind-packed snow that comes away in slabs and blocks, almost like spading frozen ground, until a passage opens and daylight and a wave of even colder air come pouring in together. You cut a path, then you keep it. The paths this winter are strange that way. They aren't cut once and finished. They're cut and recut after every storm. And because the snow only ever deepens and never melts, the paths sink lower and lower between their walls until you're walking in a trench with sides of snow standing higher than your own head. A narrow blue-shadowed canyon just wide enough for a person, running from the door to the stable and from the door to the street. A child walking to the woodpile disappears into it entirely. Only the top of a bonnet moves along above the snow. Over that one winter, more than 100 inches of it'll fall on this country. Snow past the window sills, snow to the eaves, snow deep enough that the low buildings of the town hunch down into it like animals bedding in. And the only proof that a street runs through the middle of the town at all is the pattern of these narrow-cut trenches linking door to door. The snow itself isn't what you might think. It isn't wet and heavy and packing. It's so cold that it has gone dry as sugar, dry as fine sand, and it squeaks and crunches under a boot with a high dry sound, and it won't make a snowball to save its life. It just sifts through your mittens like dust. After a storm passes and the sky clears hard and blue, that dry snow throws the sun straight back up at you off a million tiny facets, until the whole world glitters and glares and aches to look at, and the shadows in the trenches go a deep and lovely blue, and for an hour the buried town is almost unbearably beautiful, if you have a spare moment to think it, which mostly you don't. You aren't the one who does the heaviest of the digging. That falls to Charles and to Laura, who at 13 is strong and willing and glad of any work that lets her move. but you're in it all the same, clearing the step, keeping the doorway open, sweeping back the fine snow that sifts in under the door and across the sill and tries day after day to come into the house and lie on your clean floor. When the diggers come stamping back in, crusted white to the eyebrows, their faces stiff and their hands past feeling, you're the warm thing they come back to, meeting them with a place by the stove and something hot to hold, and the plain animal comfort of a room that the cold hasn't been allowed to have. The path is open again for now, the door works for now, and you go back inside and shut it on the glittering blue and white world, and the next storm already is somewhere out on the northwest edge of things, taking its time, coming. There's water to think about, always, and there's a great deal more thinking in it than there ever was at home. Water doesn't simply arrive this winter. Everything that a household of 7 needs to drink and cook with and wash in has to be got by hand against the cold, and the cold is very good at taking water away from you. What ought to be the simplest thing in the world becomes a small daily campaign, hauling and heating and guarding a bucket so it doesn't freeze solid in the corner of your own kitchen overnight. When the getting is hardest, there's always snow, endless snow, mountains of it right outside the door, and you'd think that would settle the question. It doesn't. Snow is a liar when it comes to water. You pack a big kettle full to the brim with it, heaping, and set it on the stove, and it sighs and shrinks down to almost nothing, an inch of grey water in the bottom of the pot where a whole kettle of snow used to be. It takes a mountain of snow to make a cupful of water. There's a tap in your kitchen that would end this whole argument in about 4 seconds, hot or cold, as much as you please, and it will never once ask you to carry it, or thaw it, or ration it against the length of the winter. She'd have looked at that tap for a long quiet moment, and then she'd have gone straight back to her bucket, because wishing has never yet filled one. So you're always melting, always hauling, always keeping the one bucket from becoming a block of ice, and you never ever pour a drop of it away that could still be used for something. And still, in the thick of all that scarcity, you wash, because a clean house and a clean family are the line you've drawn, the same line as the tablecloth, and the winter doesn't get to erase it. The dishes are done in water heated on the stove, your hands going in and out of it, warm to raw to warm again, and wash day, when it comes around, is an all-day siege, heating water kettle by hard-won kettle, the harsh lye soap, the scrubbing board, the wringing done by 2 red aching hands because there's nothing else to wring with. You can't dry a wash outside in a blizzard. You can hang it in the brief hard cold after a storm, but then it freezes on the line before it can dry, every shirt and sheet snapping stiff as a plank, and you carry the wash back in like a stack of flat frozen boards, shirts holding the shape of a man with no man in them, and stand them and drape them all about the stove to thaw and steam and finally, slowly, dry. For a few hours the whole room is a damp forest of laundry, dripping and steaming and smelling of soap and wet wool, and you move through it doing everything else that also must be done. It's absurd in a way, all this labour for cleanliness in a house at the frozen end of nowhere. And it isn't absurd at all. It's one more way of refusing to let go, one more small daily proof that you're still keeping house, still keeping standards, still winning, quietly, against a winter that would like nothing better than to wear you down to not caring. The wash, stiff and then soft, dries at last by the fire. You'll do this tonight if you do it at all, by dropping a basket into a machine and pressing a square of glass, and it will wash and rinse and wring the whole load while you sleep and hand it back warm. She is the machine. Every part of it, start to finish, is her 2 hands and the fire, and the wind on a hard bright day doing the last of it for free. The fire that you fed so carefully before dawn has one great flaw this winter. It's always hungry and there's almost nothing left to feed it. Think for a moment about what a stove is supposed to eat. Coal, if you're lucky and the trains are running, black and dense and slow, a scuttle of it lasting through a cold night. Or wood, split from good hardwood logs, a stack of it seasoned in the shed. You had coal back in the fall. It's gone, and there's no wood, because out here on this treeless plain there were never enough trees to speak of, nothing to split, nothing to season. So you burn the only thing this country grows in any plenty, which is grass, Wild hay, cut green from the wet prairie meadows in the good summer weeks and stacked for the animals, are now carried in armload by armload to be burned in the stove to keep 5 people from freezing. You're heating your home with a summer meadow. There's something almost tender in that, and something a little desperate both at once. But you can't simply stuff loose hay into a stove. Loose hay flares up in a bright rush and is gone in a breath. All flame and no staying, and it would take a haystack an hour to do the work of one small log. So you learn the trick, the way the town has learned the trick this winter, of twisting. You take a good wisp of hay in both hands, and you twist it tight and tighter, winding it against itself until it draws up into a hard, dense rope. Then you double it, and tuck the ends back through so it can't spring loose, and what you're left with, in your 2 hands, is a hard, twisted stick of hay, near as solid as a billet of wood that will sit in the coals and burn slow instead of fast, a hay stick, and the fire eats them the way a growing boy eats supper, which is to say faster than you can quite believe. There's the catch of it then. One twisted stick doesn't last long, a handful of minutes at best, and so the fire needs another, and another, and another, straight through the day and deep into the night. Which means that someone in this house must be twisting hay almost all the time that they're awake, just to stand still, just to keep the same fire burning in the same stove. You sit with a heap of loose hay at your feet and you twist, and your hands learn the grass. The dry stems are sharp. They have edges you'd never notice picking a summer bouquet, and by the 10th stick and the 50th and the 200th, those edges have found every crease in your fingers. The hay pricks and saws and works its way in, and your hands grow red, then raw, then cracked, the skin splitting at the knuckles until it stings to close your fist. Everyone's hands are like this now. It's simply what hands look like this winter. You twist through it, because the alternative to twisting is a cold stove, and a cold stove in this weather isn't a discomfort. It's a danger with a clock on it, and there's a small mercy folded inside the hard work, the thing I'd want you to carry out of this room. When a twist of that meadow hay catches and burns, it gives off for just a moment the smell of the summer it was cut in. Warm and green and grassy, the smell of July, of sun on a field, and a breeze moving through tall grass, rising up out of the stove in the middle of the deepest, whitest, most locked-down day of the year. You breathe it without meaning to, a little ghost of summer, burning to keep the winter out. Then it's gone, and you reach down and twist another stick and feed it in after the first. By the time the light has come up as far as it means to come, which isn't far, the whole white world outside has arrived at the window. You go and look at it the way a sailor reads the sky, to know it, to plan around it, and there isn't much to see, and what there is enormous. The glass is furred thick with frost on the inside, so first you have to warm a coin or a thumbnail, and press a small clear porthole into the ice to see through it all. And through that little round window you have made there's white. Only white. The sky is white, and the ground is white, and where one ends and the other begins is anybody's guess. The snow has piled up against the house until it stands well past the bottom of the window, a smooth blue-white drift with a hard wind-carved crust, and beyond it the air itself is full of moving snow, so that the few other buildings of the town, which you know are standing right there, a stone's throw off, have simply dissolved. There's no town. There's a white roar, and somewhere inside it, your house. The wind is the thing that never stops. You have grown so used to it that you only really hear it when it changes. But it's always there, a great steady pour of air out of the northwest, leaning on the walls, finding every seam, singing a low, endless note in the stovepipe like a finger drawn around the rim of a glass. Some days it drops for an hour and the silence is almost frightening. It feels so much like the world holding its breath. Then it comes back. The storms come marching in one after another all winter, a blizzard every few days, some of them lasting 3 days at a stretch before they blow themselves out, and between them only a brief hard brightness before the next dark line shows up on the northwest edge of the sky. You have stopped counting them. Counting doesn't help. Twice a day into that goes Charles, out to the little stable behind the house, where the stock stands steaming in the cold, to be fed and watered and kept alive, because they're freezing and starving right along with the people. It isn't far, a few dozen steps, close enough to hit with a stone on a clear day. On a bad day, it may as well be a few dozen miles. Men have died that winter, and other winters like it, walking from the house to the barn and losing the way in the white, wandering off blind into a field 100 steps from their own warm door. So when the snow's flying, nobody simply strolls out to the stable. You keep a line strung, a rope run taut between the house and the shelter, and you go out hand over hand along it, and you never ever let go, because the rope is the only thing in all that white world that knows the way home. You watch him go, and you watch the whites swallow him, and you keep half an eye on the door until it opens again and he stamps back in, crusted and breathing hard, bringing the cold in with him in a rolling wave across the floor. Then the door shuts, the bar drops, the wind leans on the other side of it and finds it won't open, and inside the fire ticks, and the mill waits, and the frost holds its ground on the walls, and the day goes quietly on. While that fire holds steady for a while, let me tell you about all the things that aren't in this house anymore, because the list is its own kind of story. Coffee, first, since there's a coffee mill sitting right there on the shelf, doing the work of a grist mill. There has been no coffee in it for a long time. It's the kind of small daily irony you catch out of the corner of your eye a dozen times a day. A little machine built for one purpose and one pleasure. The grinding of dark, fragrant beans for a hot cup at the end of a meal, and it hasn't smelled a coffee bean in weeks, and instead it grinds hard, pale wheat from dawn to dark to keep a family fed. It has been promoted, you might say, from a maker of small pleasures to a keeper of lives, and it didn't ask for the promotion, and it does the harder job without complaint, which is more than can be said for most of us. When the good times come back, and you do believe they will come back, that mill will go back to grinding coffee of a Sunday, and you'll let it gladly, and you may never look at it again with the eyes you're using tonight. And it isn't only coffee. The white sugar is gone, and the white flour, the fine soft flour that made light bread and cake and pie, all gone, which is the reason the little mill grinds the coarse dark seed wheat in the first place. The tea is stretched so thin it's more the memory of tea than the fact of it. The meat is down to nothing. The salt pork and the smoked things eaten weeks ago, so that a winter that ought to have a full smokehouse behind it has only the lean bread and a few potatoes going soft in the last of the sack. The dried apples, the little treats, the small good things a woman lays by in the fall to brighten a hard month. Spent, and the kerosene, of course, gone first of all, which is why you see by a burning button. One by one, all winter, the good things have gone quiet and left the house, until what remains is the short, hard list of exactly what it takes to stay alive, and not one item more. And here's the strange part. Nearly everything on that missing list is sitting on a shelf a few miles from you right now, under bright light, stacked in more of itself than anyone could carry, waiting. For her, a few miles may as well be the far side of the moon, because between her door and that shelf lies snow no wheel on earth can cross. The same short distance, a different century, all the difference in the world. This is what surprises people who've never been hungry in a cheerful house. It doesn't make the family grim, it makes them dream. The favourite game of the long shut-in evenings is the game of what we'll eat first, when the trains come through. The children lay out imaginary feasts, whole tables of them, roast meat and white bread with butter, sugar by the spoonful, oranges of all things, and they argue happily over the menu of a meal that doesn't exist and won't exist for months, and the arguing warms them better than the food would nearly. You let them dream. You may even quietly be dreaming a little yourself, of a full flour barrel and a lamp you can simply light. And you have, hidden back somewhere only you know about, some tiny thing saved against a coming day, a scrap of something sweet perhaps, held in reserve for a birthday you know is coming in the white weeks ahead, because a mother doesn't let even a winter like this one swallow a child's birthday whole. The mill grinds on, patient, giving no argument, and the dreaming rises around it like warmth off the stove. Twice a day, out along that rope in the flying snow, someone goes to keep the animals alive, and their winter is worth a moment of your thought too, because it's bound up with yours more tightly than you might guess. The horses stand in the small stable out behind the house, and whatever else the family keeps depends on the same short supply of everything. They're cold as you are, only they can't bank a fire or pile on a quilt. They can only stand in their stalls with their winter coats grown long and shaggy, and their breath smoking in the dim, turning the long hours the way animals do, patient past all understanding. Charles goes out to them morning and evening, hand over hand along the line, to break the ice on their water and fork them down their feed and simply be with them a while in the animal-smelling dark, and there's a tenderness in it that tells you a good deal about the man, that in the middle of his own hard winter he won't let a beast suffer 1 ounce more than it must. But here's the hard knot in the middle of it, the thing that makes you careful every time you carry an armload of hay to the stove. That hay is their food. The same wild meadow grass that you twist into sticks and burn to keep the children from freezing is the exact same hay the horses need in their bellies to keep from starving in the cold. Every stick you burn is a mouthful they don't get. So the hay has to be divided, carefully, painfully, between the fire that keeps the people and the feed that keeps the animals, and there isn't really enough for both, and you all walk that line all winter, giving the stove what the people must have and the stock what the beasts must have, and praying the pile outlasts the snow. Because those horses aren't only animals, they're the spring ploughing, they're the crop that has to go in the ground the moment the ground thaws, or there's no next winter worth surviving to. Keeping them alive is keeping the future alive, and you know it, and so a little of the precious hay goes out the door to the stable every day, even as you count the sticks by the stove. The animals turn in the dim, the pile goes slowly down, and you carry your armload back inside and feed the fire its share and do the sum again tomorrow. Somewhere around the middle of the day, the light in the window is as good as it's going to get, and you stop for the small still meal that passes for noon dinner now. It's bread again. Of course it's bread again. The same coarse brown bread from the same little mill, and whatever thin thing there's to make it feel like more, and a cup of something warm. You've become an artist of the small variation, the tiny difference that keeps sameness from becoming despair. A pinch of something held back for flavour. The bread cut a new way. It isn't much, and it's everything, and the family gathers and eats it and is, for a little while, warm and together and fed, which this winter is the only definition of lucky that anyone needs. After, there's a lull. The one soft hollow in the day, when the worst of the morning work is done and the long push towards supper hasn't yet begun, the girls settle, and you take up a bit of mending, because there's always mending, socks worn through at the heel and a seam gone at the elbow, and you sit near the light with the needle going in and out, and your hands do the work without you, the way hands do, and your mind, for once, is free to wander. When a woman's hands are busy and her mind comes loose, it tends to drift backward, along the road it came in on. You weren't always here. That's a strange thing to remember, sitting in a cold room at the edge of the world. You were a little girl once, in green Wisconsin, in a house full of brothers and sisters, and your father went out one day onto the big lake, the way he always did, and the lake didn't give him back. You were barely 5 years old, and your mother, left alone with a long row of children and no husband and not much of anything else, did the thing you have watched women do your whole life and are doing yourself right now. She didn't fall down, she kept the house, she fed the children, she held the whole leaning weight of it up on her own 2 shoulders, without any fuss, because there was no one else to do it, and the children still had to eat. You learned how to be a mother from a woman with no husband and no cushion and no promise of spring, and you learned it so young you can't remember learning it at all. It's simply in your hands, like the twist of the hay. By 16 you were a schoolteacher, standing in front of a room, which was no small thing for a girl then, and you carried books and careful grammar and a straight back all the rest of your life, and you still do, out here where no one but your own children will ever grade you on it. Then a quiet young man named Charles came courting, with a fiddle and a restless eye already turned toward the far edge of the map, and on the 1st of February, in the year 1860, just past your 20th birthday, you married him. 21 years ago now. 21 years, and how many houses? You have lost count of the houses. Wisconsin, and then a wagon, and then Kansas, and then a wagon again, and Minnesota, and Iowa, and back to Minnesota, and now here, each time a new bare place and the same old task, to make it a home before the first snow. You have packed a household into a wagon and shaken it back out into a strange room more times than you can number, and every single time you have hung the same care on the walls and set the same standards on the table and made it, somehow, ours. And once, in the middle of all that moving, in another state, in another year, you buried a little boy. Not even 1 year old. That's a grief that doesn't go away, only goes quiet. And it goes quiet the way the wind sometimes goes quiet, which is to say you never quite trust it, and you carry it, and you don't hang it on the wall for the children to see. You carried it out here along with everything else. You're carrying it right now, under the mending while your face stays calm. Some things you simply carry. And the wagon rolled on west because west was where he was going, and you were going with him, and that was that. A stick of hay shifts and settles in the stove with a soft collapsing sound, and the small warm smell of summer grass rises again, and you're back. Back in the present, in the low afternoon light, needle in hand, 21 years and 1,000 miles from that green lake. With the wind at the wall and your living children breathing around you in the warm, you draw the thread through and knot it and bite it off. The mending is done. There's no time this winter to sit long with the past. The present needs both your hands. None of this, not 1 hour of it, is carried alone. There's a man in this house, and the two of you are pulling this whole winter like a team in harness, each to your own traces, and it's worth stopping in the middle of the day to see how that team is yoked. The work has divided itself the way it tends to, along the old lines. The outside of this fight is mostly his. The digging out, the hauling, the twice-daily push through the storm to the stable, the heaviest of the hay, the going out into the danger so the rest of you need not. The inside is mostly yours. The fire and the food and the children and the warmth and the whole delicate machinery of a home kept running under siege. Neither half works without the other. His digging is worth nothing if there's no warm room to dig back into, and your warm room is worth nothing if he doesn't keep the path open, and the animals alive and the wheat somehow coming. You're two halves of one act of keeping 5 other people alive, and after all these years and all these houses you do it without much need for words. A look across the room, a hand briefly on a shoulder, the long wordless understanding of two people who have been in harness together a very long time. It hasn't always been an easy yoke, and I won't pretend otherwise, because the plain truth is gentler and more interesting than any pretense. He's the one with the restless eye, the one who kept looking west, who moved this family from green-settled country out to this raw and dangerous edge because something in him needed the far horizon. And you're the one who packed the wagon every time and made the home every time and paid, in labour and in worry, the price of his horizons. You could have dug your heels in somewhere back along the road, and many a woman would have. You didn't. You cast your lot in with his for good and for ill, and you followed him out past the edge of the map because he was going there and you'd chosen him. And out here at the end of that long road, in the worst winter of both your lives, you don't throw it in his face. You stand beside him at the stove and you pull your half of the load and you keep your face calm, and he knows, as surely as you do, exactly what the other one is holding up. That isn't a small love. That's the enormous, unglamorous, daily kind. The kind that actually keeps people alive, and it's humming quietly under this whole freezing house like the warmth under the ash. And then there are the two little ones, the ones who need you the most and understand the least. And a good part of your heart is kept in their particular keeping. There's Grace, the baby, not quite 4, born out here on the prairie, who has never known any home but the edge of the world, and takes it entirely for granted the way small children take everything. She lives in a warm, bright bubble that you build fresh around her each morning, out of the fire and the bread smell and the nearness of Ma, and she doesn't truly know that anything is wrong, and that not knowing is a thing you have worked hard to give her. One of the finest things you make all winter. Her whole world is that in here's warm and safe, and out there's only cold and noise, and that so long as she can keep you in sight, nothing can reach her. And she's right. As long as she can see you, she's. And there's Carrie, 10 years old and slight as a bird, the delicate one, whose health has always been a thread you watch. Between Mary, who needs so much care, and Laura, who blazes so bright and busy, quiet, thin Carrie can slip toward the edge of notice, and you don't let her, because you know that the quiet middle child is exactly the one a mother must keep the most careful eye on. So you watch her colour at the table. You make sure her portion is enough and her wraps are warm and her small quiet needs aren't lost in the noise of louder ones. She isn't strong. This winter isn't kind to a body that was never sturdy. And you nurse her along through it with a low, steady attention that she will likely never fully know was there. That's often the way with the deepest care. It works best when it's never noticed at all, and you have long since made your peace with going unthanked for the very best things you do. In the middle of the afternoon, you find Mary. Or rather, you're always finding Mary, keeping a soft thread of attention on her as you do on all of them. But the afternoon is when you have a moment to sit close. She's 16 now, your oldest, and for coming on 2 years she's lived in the dark since the long fever burned through her when she was 14 and took the sight from her eyes and left everything else. Her mind, her patience, her lovely calm, exactly as it was. You won't pity her out loud. She wouldn't stand for it, and it would do her no good. And besides, pity is a kind of giving up, and no one in this house is giving up on anything. So instead you do the more useful and more loving thing. You keep her in the world. You describe it to her. Not in a sad, careful voice, but plainly, as you'd point out anything to anyone. The exact grey the sky has gone. The way the frost has feathered on the glass this morning, ferns and stars of it. The look of the little flame in the button lamp. Laura does this too, better than anyone. Paints the whole world in words for her sister, until Mary can very nearly see it. But you do your share. Because a person who can't see must not be allowed to also become a person no one describes anything to. That's how the dark would win. And you don't let the dark win. Not the dark outside the window and not the dark behind your daughter's eyes. And Mary isn't idle in it. She knits by feel, her fingers reading the stitches, and she minds Grace. And when the coffee mill comes around to her, she grinds her share of the wheat by sound and touch alone, doing the exact work the seeing hands do, because she asked to and because it's hers to do. There's talk sometimes, in the low evenings, of a day when the trains run again and the wide world comes back, of a school far away, a real school for the blind, where a girl like Mary might learn and grow and make something of the good mind the fever left her. It's only talk this winter. It's a small far light, held out ahead. But you hold it out because a person needs something ahead of them. Some door standing open somewhere down the road, and you have never once in 21 years let one of your children believe there was no door. The afternoon leans on. Mary knits. The stitches whisper. And nobody argues with the quiet. You aren't the only house holding on. It helps some afternoons to remember that the town is out there, close, even when you can't see across the street for the flying white. It's a very young town, this to Smet. A year or two ago it was open prairie with a survey stake in it, and now it's a short raw row of new wooden buildings and the people who came to bet their lives on them, and almost everyone in it's a newcomer, a long way from wherever they started, with no deep roots to fall back on but each other. And that, it turns out, is a kind of root of its own. When the snow closes the country and the trains stop and every family is down to its own thin stores, the town doesn't fly apart into every house for itself. It draws in. Word travels along the cut trenches from door to door. Who is low on this? Who has a little of that? Whose baby is poorly? Who hasn't been seen in a few days and had best be looked in on? A cut-off town is a hard place, but it isn't a lonely one, and there's a rough plain decency in the way these near strangers keep half an eye on one another through the worst of it, so that no one quietly freezes or starves alone while a neighbour 100 steps away has little to spare. The ordinary gathering places have gone still, of course. The church bell doesn't call much through the storms. The little schoolhouse, where Carrie and Laura would be sitting on any normal winter, has closed its door, because you can't keep a schoolroom warm on the far side of a blizzard, and you can't send children out through weather that loses grown men between the house and the barn, and so the school simply stops and waits for spring like everything else. That's part of why the lessons moved home to your own table. But the closing of these places doesn't close the town. It only folds it down smaller, into the separate warm houses, each one a little coal of the same banked fire, all of them holding their heat and their hope through the same long dark, all of them waiting for the same thaw. You're one house among them. You aren't, whatever the wind would have you feel, alone out here. The whole town is leaning into the wind right beside you. The hardest thing to keep whole in a house shut tight for days on end isn't the body, it's the spirit of the small ones. A blizzard doesn't always blow through in a night. Some of them settle in and stay 2 days, 3 days, a solid, roaring wall of weather that makes going out of doors simply impossible. And for all that time, the whole family is sealed into these few small rooms together with the wind screaming at the walls and no way out and nothing new under the sun. A grown person can bear it. You set your mind to endure, and you endure. But a child isn't built to be still and shut in for 3 days running, and a very young child least of all. And there's a particular restlessness that builds up in a small body with nowhere to put itself. A fraying, a whining edge that can pull a tight, warm room to pieces faster than any cold. So keeping the children occupied isn't a small nicety. It's survival of a different kind, the survival of everyone's frayed nerves and the peace of the house. You're endlessly inventive about it, because you have to be. There's always some little task a child can be set to, some helping that's half a game. There are stories, old ones told again, and new ones spun out of nothing, and there are songs, and there are the small homemade amusements that cost nothing but a mother's patience, cards to sort, a bit of sewing for the older girls, playthings made from scraps for the younger. The girls play the games children have always played when there's nothing but each other, and they make their own fun in the corners, and you keep the machine of it turning, refereeing, redirecting, heading off the squabble before it starts. And under all of it, quietly, you're keeping something else out of the room, which is fear. The children can feel that this isn't an ordinary winter. They aren't fools. But whether that knowledge sits in them as adventure or as dread depends almost entirely on the face of the woman at the stove, and so you give them, hour after hour, day after shut-in day, a face that says this is hard, but this is fine. And they believe your face over their own worry, and the walls feel a little farther away. There's a fear in this house that has no season, and the winter only sharpens its edge. It's the fear of sickness. Because if illness comes into this house now, really comes, there's no help to send for. The doctor, if there's one to be had at all, is somewhere on the far side of the same impassable snow that's holding back the trains, as good as on the moon. You're the doctor here. You're the doctor and the nurse and all of the medicine, you and a small store of simple remedies and whatever sense and steadiness you can bring to a hot forehead in the night. And this family, of all families, knows exactly what sickness can take and never give back, because you have watched it happen. The fever that came through a few years ago didn't kill your oldest girl, but it took her eyes, and Mary has lived in the dark ever since. And not one of you has forgotten for a single day how a thing that starts as an ordinary fever can end as a life changed forever. So you watch. You watch them all the time without seeming to for the flush, the cough, the too bright eye, the child gone quiet who is usually loud. You keep them warm and dry and as well fed as the thin stores allow, because a strong body fights off what a weak one can't. And half of doctoring is never letting the sickness get its foot in the door at all. It's a heavy thing to be the only wall between 5 people and every illness the cold can carry, and you carry it the way you carry everything, quietly. And today, at least, everyone is well, and you'll take that plain small victory and be grateful for it. And there's the matter of keeping 5 people clothed, which never ends and never will. Nothing new is coming. Whatever cloth and wool and thread are already in this house is all there's going to be until the wide world opens up again. And in the meantime, children keep growing and clothes keep wearing out, entirely indifferent to the state of the railroad. So the work basket is never empty, and your needle is never idle for long. There's mending, always mending, the split seam and the worn heel and the elbow gone through. There's patching, a good patch cut from a worn-out thing too far gone to save, laid over the weak place in a thing still worth keeping. There's the letting down of hems and the taking in of seams as one child shoots up and another stays small, the endless handing down of everything from the big girls to the little ones, remade and refitted at every step, so that a single dress may clothe 3 girls in its long life before it finally becomes patches for something else. And there's the knitting, the socks above all, because feet must be kept warm or feet get frostbitten, and wool socks wear through at the heel quicker than seems possible, so there's nearly always a sock on your needles, growing round and round in the lamplight, or an old one being darned back into use, some of them by now more darn than sock. It's plain work and humble work, and it goes on forever, and it isn't vanity, not out here. Good warm wool isn't about looking well, it's about not freezing. Every sock you turn is a small piece of armour against the cold, and you make them, and mend them, and make them again, and the basket by your chair is never, ever empty. You're scraping the last of the brown flour from the mill's little drawer when the news reaches you, and it reaches you the way everything reaches this house now, second-hand and late. By a word carried in on cold air, by talk at the door, by the plain evidence of what does and doesn't appear on your table. There's something happening out in the town in these same white weeks, and it's the quiet thing keeping all of you alive. You aren't there for it. You're here, at your stove, with your hands full. But it reaches you all the same, because in the end everything in a small cut-off town reaches everyone, and this is the thing that's quietly keeping all of you alive. The town is running out of food. Not your house alone, the whole town. The stores on the one short street have sold down to bare shelves and swept corners, because nothing has come in on the rails since the snow closed them, and a town isn't a farm. A town is a row of people who buy their bread, and when the buying stops, the town starts to starve, all together politely behind closed doors. It's the kind of danger that doesn't announce itself. There's no single terrible night. There's only the slow arithmetic of less, and everyone doing the same sums in their heads, and nobody saying the word out loud in front of the children. And then, the way these things happen, 2 young men decide to do something that a sensible person would call foolish. There's a rumour, a homesteader somewhere off to the south, out past the edge of everything, who raised a good crop of wheat last summer and might, just might, still have it. Miles away, across open country with no road, no fence, no tree, nothing to steer by, in the dead heart of the worst winter anyone can remember, with a new storm always crouched on the northwest horizon. And 2 of the town's young men, one of them a slight quiet fellow named Almanzo, and the other a bright laughing boy named Cap Garland, hitch up their sleds and go anyway. Out into the white southward, following nothing but a guess in the low winter sun, betting their lives against a rumour of wheat. The way the story would be told long after, they went something like 12 miles out. 12 miles into that emptiness, until against all odds they found the place, and found the man, and found that the wheat was real. He had it, sacked and waiting. They bought what they could carry, some 60 bushels of it heaped onto the sleds, and they turned for home with the light already failing and the sky already thickening in the northwest, and they beat the next blizzard back into town by a margin so thin it doesn't bear thinking about. Behind them the storm closed the door they had just slipped through, and there was wheat in the town again. Not much, spread across so many, but enough to grind, enough to bake, enough to push the terrible arithmetic back another few weeks, and keep the word starvation locked outside in the snow where it belonged. Some of that grain, or grain just like it, is very likely what sits in a sack in your own house, feeding your own little mill, becoming your own family's bread. You didn't ride out for it, but you're the reason it becomes food. A bushel of hard wheat isn't supper, it's only the promise of supper, and the promise has to be kept by hand, 1 turn of a crank and 1 loaf at a time, by a woman at a stove. 2 boys carried the wheat through the storm. You carry it the rest of the way, the last and slowest miles, from grain to bread to a child's plate, every day, without a sled or a story or a soul to cheer you. Both of those are a kind of courage. Only one of them ever gets told. Tonight at least we're telling the other one. Outside the light is already sliding away toward another long evening, and there's work yet before the dark comes down. Of all the pairs of hands that pass the coffee mill around this house, there's one you find yourself watching with a particular mix of pride and worry, and they belong to your second girl, Laura. She's 13, and she's made of something quick and bright and restless, and this shut-in winter chafes at her the way a harness chafes a young horse that wants to run. She's strong for her age and willing past her strength, and she wants, always, to be doing, to be useful, to be in the middle of the work rather than kept safe at the edge of it. So she takes the hard shares gladly. She grinds at the mill until her arm gives out, and then grinds a while longer. She twists hay beside her father until her hands are as cracked and raw as his. She's the one who turns the whole world into words for Mary, tirelessly, better than anyone, so that her blind sister can very nearly see. She would go out into the storm itself and dig if you let her, and sometimes you do let her, because the work is real and the family needs it, and because you understand, better than she knows, exactly what it's in her that can't sit still while others labour. You see where it comes from. You have been married to where it comes from for 21 years. And so with Laura, your task is a little different than with the others. It isn't to coax her to help, but gently to rein her, to keep that headlong willing spirit from spending itself past what even a strong young body can bear, to teach her the patience that doesn't come natural to her, the long slow patience that a winter like this one demands and that you have in such deep supply. She doesn't always take the lesson easily. There's a spark in her that flares up against being held back, a quickness to feel a thing is unfair, and the two of you have your quiet moments over it. But underneath the chafing, she's watching you, all the time, the way children watch the parent they're most like, learning the very steadiness she's too young yet to want. She misses nothing, this one. She takes in every corner of this hard winter with those wide, watchful eyes, the cold and the courage and the smell of the bread and the sound of the wind, and something in her keeps all of it, holds every detail fast, forgets nothing. You don't know what that will come to. You only know that of all your children, she's the one who seems to be storing the whole winter up inside herself, as if she means to carry it somewhere. And she takes her turn at the mill and grinds and hands it on. The afternoon, before supper takes it over, is when you keep the other fires going. The ones that don't show. You were a school teacher before you were any of the rest of it, and you never fully stopped. So even here, even now, there's school in this house. Not every day, and never for long, but the lessons don't simply stop because the trains did. There are letters to be traced and words to be spelled and sums to be worked, on a slate if there's one and out loud if there isn't, and you hear the girls they're reading, and you correct a soft grammar the way your own careful mouth was corrected long ago. Carrie puzzles over her figures. Laura, quick and a little impatient, races ahead and is gently reined back in. And Mary, who can't see the page, holds more in her memory than any of them, and recites, and is right, and you let the pride show on that one because she has earned it, and can't see your face to be embarrassed by it anyway. It would be so easy to let all of this go. It's the thing I keep coming back to sitting with this woman. Nobody out here would blame you for it. Survival is a full day's work all by itself, and a spelling lesson bakes no bread and twists no hay and keeps out not 1 degree of cold. But you understand something that doesn't fit on a ledger, which is that people don't live on bread alone, that a mind left to go dark in a long winter is its own kind of freezing, and that the children who come out the far side of this white season need to come out of it still growing, still reaching, still themselves. So you spend some of your precious warmth and your precious light and your precious dwindling strength on spelling words, on keeping the floor swept and the faces washed and the hair combed, on the small daily proofs that you're a family living a life and not just 5 animals waiting out a storm in a wooden box. There's something in this I find quietly heroic, and I don't use that word lightly. Anyone can keep a body alive with enough grim effort. It takes something rarer to keep a childhood alive at the same time, in the same freezing room, on the same empty pantry. She does both, and she doesn't appear to notice that it's anything out of the ordinary, which is of course the most moving part of all. And there are small warmths that cost nothing. A story told from memory while hands twist hay. A funny thing, Grace says, in the way of not quite 4-year-olds, that sets the whole cold room laughing out loud for a minute. Real laughing. The kind that fogs the air. A song hummed low over the mending. You aren't only enduring this winter. Here and there, in the cracks of it, you're enjoying your own children, because they're here and they're yours and the storm can't get through the wall, and a person has to take the good hours where they fall. The light thickens toward grey. Somebody lights the button lamp against the coming dark. And the afternoon, its quiet work done, folds itself up and hands the day over to the evening. There's a thing worth saying plainly, before the day tips over into evening, about who in this house is ever truly off duty, because the answer is that you aren't, and never quite have been. Consider how the others get their small rests. Charles comes in from the cold and the digging and the stable, and he sits by the stove and thaws and takes an hour to be still. The girls have their spells of play, their games in the corner, their whispered talk, hours that are simply theirs. Even in a winter as hard as this one, there are pauses in the day for everyone but you. You are awake and working before any of them opened an eye, breathing the fire back to life in the black. You'll be awake and working after the last of them has gone under, banking that same fire down for the night. And in between, across the long middle of the day, there's never a stretch that's fully yours, because the fire always wants feeding, and a child always wants something, and the bread won't make itself, and the delicate warm machine of the household runs on your attention and stops without it. There's no clocking out, no bell rings to set you free. The work of keeping 5 people alive and warm and fed and calm doesn't pause for you to rest. And so, mostly, you don't rest. Not really. Not until the dark. And here's the thing that would surprise anyone who pitied you for it, which you wouldn't thank them to do. You wouldn't hand it over. This is yours. These 5 lives, held up through this hard season by your 2 hands and your steady face, are the work of your life, and you know their worth exactly. Even if no ledger anywhere will ever record a line of it. There will be no wages for this winter. There will be no thanks, or very few. Because the very best of what you do is the kind that's never noticed, the disaster that quietly never happens, the fear the children never catch, the morning that's simply warm again as if by magic. You do the most important work there is, all day, every single day, without a day off and without applause, and you find in it not martyrdom but a deep plain steadiness, the settled knowledge of a person who is doing exactly what matters most and knows it. Let the winter be endless, let the work be ceaseless, you're equal to it. One more time, as you've been equal to it every morning so far, the light thins toward evening, the stove wants feeding again, and you rise because that's what you do, and see to it. Supper starts long before supper. It always has, in a house like this, and never more than now, when supper isn't so much cooked as assembled, coaxed, stretched out of almost nothing by a woman who has done impossible sums with a pantry, so many times she no longer finds them impossible. There's bread, because there's always bread, the same dark, coarse loaf, and by now you've taken the little coffee mill down from the shelf once more, and ground the last of what the evening needs, your arm aching in the old familiar place, the drawer filling its slow spoonful at a time. You measure, you always measure. You know to the mouthful how much is in this house, and how many mouths there are, and how many days stand between now and any hope of more, and you lay the supper out against those numbers with a steadiness that would frighten you if you ever let yourself look straight at it. So you keep yourself from looking straight at it. You butter no bread you don't have. You simply feed them tonight well enough, and you trust tomorrow to bring its own answers, because the alternative is to sit down in the middle of the floor and weep, and you have 5 people watching, and Ma doesn't weep in front of the children. Ma sets down the plates. They gather in the small gold ring of the button lamp, the one poor flame doing the work the whole house used to ask of good bright kerosene, and in that soft and generous light the plainness of the meal is a little bit hidden, the way candlelight is kind to everything. Grace is fed first and fed carefully, because she's the smallest and understands the least and needs the most. Grace only knows that the world outside is white and loud, and in here it's warm, with Ma close by, which when you aren't quite 4 is the entire and sufficient truth of things. The others take their portions and are grateful, in the plain way of people who have learned exactly what a portion is worth. Grace is said over it. The same words. You'd say them over an empty table. You have very nearly had to. It has been weeks now of this. Weeks of brown bread and little else. The same taste, The same weight, meal after meal after meal, and I won't pretend to you that sameness is nothing, because sameness is its own slow test, the kind that wears at a person under the ribs where it doesn't show. There's no drama in it. That's what makes it hard. A single terrible night a person can rise to. It's the 200th identical plate of the same coarse bread, with the wind saying the same thing at the same wall, that asks the deeper endurance, and you meet it the only way it can be met, which is one plate at a time, without complaint, making of each small same supper a thing offered rather than a thing merely survived. The plates go quiet. The lamp holds its little light. Outside the dark has come down complete, and the wind has the whole night to itself again. When the supper things are cleared and wiped and set away, the family draws in close around the stove for the long evening, and this is the hour when, in any other winter of your whole married life, there would be music. You have to understand what the fiddle means in this house. Charles and his fiddle are very nearly one thing. All through the years and the wagons and the strange new rooms, whatever else was lost or left behind or sold, the fiddle came too, and at the end of the hardest day he would take it up and tune it and play, jigs and reels and the old sweet sad songs, and the music would fill whatever bare place you happened to be living in and make it, for an hour, a home. The children were rocked to sleep on that fiddle. You courted to it. It's the sound of the family being all right. When Pa plays, all is well. That's the law the children have lived by their whole lives. This winter, the fiddle is silent. His hands can't play it. The same work that keeps the fire alive has slowly ruined his hands for music. The endless twisting of the harsh, dry hay, the cracking cold, until his fingers are stiff and swollen and split at the tips, the skin broken and sore, and they simply won't fly along the strings the way they must. He has tried. It didn't go well, and it hurt to watch, and he put the fiddle back in its box. And the silence where the music used to be is one of the loudest things in the house. The children feel it even when they can't name it. If Pa isn't playing, some deep old certainty has come unmoored, and they glance, without knowing they're glancing, toward the quiet corner where the fiddle sleeps. So you fill the silence yourself, because that too is your work, not with a fiddle, with your voice and your calm and the ordinary furniture of a family evening. You get out the mending or the knitting and you set the girls to theirs. You ask Laura to tell it all again for Mary, the day, the storm, the small events, and Laura talks, and the room fills with words instead of music. You bring up other winters, warmer ones, and let the memory of them warm this one a little. Perhaps, low and unhurried, you start a hymn, one everyone knows, and the girls come in on it one by one, and for a few minutes they're singing in the house after all, plain and unaccompanied and human, rising up under the roar of the wind. It isn't the fiddle. Everyone knows it isn't the fiddle. But it's music that says the same thing the fiddle said, which is, we're still here, and we're together, and all is, against every appearance, fundamentally well. His hands will heal when the twisting stops. The twisting will stop when the winter breaks. The winter will break because winters do, and the fiddle will play again. You can't say just when. You hold it out anyway, that little firelight, as you hold out all the others, and the singing carries the evening, and the stove ticks, and the fire takes over the conversation. The nights are their own country, colder and stranger than the days, and after a while you come to know the particular voice the cold uses when it's at its worst. Because the cold, past a certain depth, begins to make sounds. When the temperature falls far enough, down past 30 below, and still falling toward that killing 40, the house itself begins to speak, and it's a startling thing the first time you hear it and never quite a comfortable one after. The timbers crack. The nails, drawn tight in the shrinking frozen wood, snap and pop with sharp reports, loud in the deep silence of the night, so that you can lie in the dark and hear your own house complaining of the cold, in little cracks and bangs like far-off shots. It's only the wood and the iron drawing up hard in the frost, nothing more, and you know that. And still some old animal part of you startles at every crack, because the sounds of a house at 40 below are the sounds of a world clamped in a grip so hard that even nails and timbers can't bear it in silence. You pull the quilt a little higher, and you listen to your house talking to the cold, and you're glad, so glad, of the banked coals holding their small red life a few feet away in the dark. That's the cold you're keeping 5 people on the right side of. Not a discomfort, not a nuisance. A force with enough strength in it to make seasoned wood crack like a whip, waiting on the other side of a thin board wall, all night, every night. And the only thing standing between it and the children are a stove full of twisted grass, and a woman who knows how to keep it fed. When you understand the cold that way, there's a thing with real teeth pressed right up against the house. Then every armload of hay and every banked coal and every warmed flat iron stops looking like a chore and starts looking like what it truly is, which is a small act of defence in a siege that doesn't lift at sundown but only changes its voice. There's a little box on a wall in your house that holds the line all night without being asked. It feels the cold coming and answers it before you so much as stir, and you have long since forgotten it is even there. Her thermostat was a woman. It felt the cold coming because the cold woke it, and it answered by rising in the dark and feeding a fire by hand, and it asked nobody's thanks and got none, and through all of it runs the hardest thread of all, the one that has no shovel and no remedy, which is simply not knowing when it'll end. That's the part the stories often leave out, because it doesn't make a scene, but it may be the heaviest thing you carry. When this winter began, back in October, when that first freak blizzard came howling in weeks before its time, no one knew it would be like this. And now, months deep into it, with the snow past the windows and the trains long stopped and the stores long empty, you still don't know how much more of it's coming. There's no voice to tell you the date the thaw will come. There's no mark on the calendar that says, hold on until here, and then it breaks. There's only one more white day, and then one more after that, an open road of them running off into a future you can't see the end of, and you have to get up in the black cold every morning of it and do the whole enormous day again without any promise that it's the last or near the last or anywhere close. Anyone can be brave for a fight with a fixed end. It's a rarer and quieter courage to be brave for a fight that will end you can't say when. To keep your face calm and your hands steady on the 100th identical morning, with the finish line still nowhere in sight. And yet you do it. And here's where you find your footing, on the one thing you do know even when you don't know the date. Winter ends. It always ends. Not because you have earned it, and not on any schedule you can command, but simply because it always has, in every year there has ever been, since long before you, and long before this town, and long before anyone was here to shiver through it and doubt it. The snow that looks eternal isn't eternal. Somewhere out past all these white, unknowable days, the wind will swing around to the south, and the great drifts will slump and darken and begin to run, and the black earth will show through, and the first train in months will come whistling across the open prairie loaded with everything the town has done without. You can't see that day from here. You don't need to see it to trust it. You hold it out ahead of yourself, just as you hold that far light out ahead of the children, on faith. And it's enough to get you up one more morning, which is all that's ever really asked of anyone. The house cracks in the frost, the coals hold, and spring, unseen and undated and absolutely certain, is already on its slow way toward you across the frozen world. Let your mind drift up and out of the house for a moment, the way it might when you stand at the black window in a lull in the talk and think about where you actually are tonight and how small a light you make. Because it isn't only your house. It's an easy thing to forget when the walls are close and the lamp is small, and your whole world has shrunk to the reach of one stove. All across the northern plains this same night, in a great white circle hundreds of miles wide, the very same winter is pressing down on the very same kind of little wooden houses. Out across Dakota, down into Minnesota, over into Iowa and Nebraska, town after town and farm after farm sits snowed to the eaves under the same iron sky, and in each of them, tonight, someone is twisting hay with cracked hands, and someone is grinding a little mill, and someone is measuring out a thin supper against a pantry that's emptying too fast, and someone, most likely a woman, is keeping a calm face over a worried heart so the children will sleep. You're one lamp in a whole dark country full of lamps. There's a strange comfort in that, if you let there be. You aren't being singled out. You're simply living, along with everyone else, through a winter that will get its own name and keep it. And out there in the white, the great struggle of the age is losing gently to the snow. The railroads, which built these towns and fed them, and were supposed to be the proof that the empty country had been conquered, can't get through. The cuts where the tracks run low between the drifts fill in solid, packed so hard by the wind that it's more like digging through rock than shoveling snow, and the companies send out crews of men, hundreds of them, with shovels and with great ploughs pushed by engine after engine to open the line, and they open it. Then the sky goes white again, and another blizzard comes down, and by morning every foot they cleared is filled back in level, as if they had never been there at all. It happened over and over that winter, until the men simply stopped. Somewhere back east, a railroad superintendent, a powerful man used to being obeyed, looked at the reports and gave the order that must have tasted like ashes, which was to stop trying until spring. The trains wouldn't come until the snow chose to let them. All the money and iron and muscle of the whole confident modern world, and it couldn't push a single loaf of bread through to you. Only 2 boys on sleds could do that, and only just, and only once. So you're thrown back, all of you, town by town and house by house, onto the oldest resources there are, your own 2 hands, your own stored up hay and seed and salt, your own patience, the knowledge, carried in the bones of women like your own widowed mother and her mother before her, of how to make a very little go a very long way, and how to keep a family calm inside a crisis. This winter has quietly rolled the whole proud frontier back 100 years, back to before the rails, back to when survival was a personal art practiced at a personal stove, and it turns out you all still know how. That is what the snow can't bury. The knowing is still there, in your hands, ready, as if it had only been waiting. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, across all those hundreds of frozen miles, it's simply an ordinary evening in an ordinary house, much like yours, wherever you happen to be listening from tonight. A lamp lit against the dark. People you love, close by, breathing, weather at the wall that can't get in. The particulars change, the sentry changes, the danger softens from starvation to something far gentler, but the shape of it's the same shape it has always been, and you know it in an instant, because you're living inside it right now, both then and now at once. The wind gathers itself outside and pours on past the house, on across all those other houses, off into the dark, and you turn back from the window into your own small circle of light. There's one more thing that holds this house up, and it doesn't show on any shelf. You're a woman of faith, in the plain, unshowy way of your time and your people, and that faith isn't a decoration on your life. It's a joist under the floor of it. Through every wagon and every strange room and every grave you have stood beside, there has been a steadiness in you that doesn't come from your own strength alone, because no one's own strength lasts that long, and you know exactly where the rest of it comes from. The good book is in this house, carried like the fiddle through every move, and it's read, and its words are known, worn smooth in your memory like stones in a creek. On the Sabbath, even now, even snowed in, you keep things a little quieter and a little more still, no more work than the day truly requires. A small held breath of rest in the middle of the grinding week. It isn't that you expect the weather to change because you ask it to. You're far too sensible for that. It's that the asking steadies the one who asks. It sets your own small trouble down inside something very large and very old, and lets you carry it more lightly, and hand a little of the calm you borrow along to 5 people who need it. The hymns are part of it too, the ones the family sang earlier under the wind, and they're chosen with care, the ones about shelter and shepherds and being carried through, sung not as a lesson but as a comfort, the words doing quietly for the grown, as the lullaby does for the child. You don't preach at your children. You have never once, I think, delivered a sermon in your life. You simply live as though certain things are true steadily, day after day, and let them draw their own conclusions from the plain evidence of a mother who doesn't break. That's a kind of teaching that no spelling slate can hold. The lamp burns low and gold, the book is set back in its place, and the long evening folds toward its close, the way all the evenings do, toward the warm and necessary business of getting 5 tired people safely down into sleep. Getting children to bed in a house this cold is its own small campaign, and you have the strategy down to an art. The beds are freezing. There's no help for that. The sleeping room, wherever the family lays down this winter, is far from the stove and holds the night the way a cellar holds it, and a bed in a cold room is a slab of cold cloth that will pull the warmth straight out of a small body and give nothing back for an hour. So you cheat the way generations of mothers in cold houses have always cheated. You set flat irons, or good smooth stones, on the stove through the last part of the evening until they're thoroughly hot, and then you wrap each one in a bit of old cloth so it won't scorch, and you carry them ahead of the children into the beds and lay them down at the foot, right where cold feet will go. By the time the child climbs in, there's a little island of warmth waiting in all that cold, something to curl a body around, and the bed that was a slab becomes a nest. It's a small thing. It's the difference between a child who shivers and frets and one who sighs and softens and lets go into sleep. You send them in bundled. Whatever warm thing each one owns goes on over the nightclothes, shawls and stockings and wraps, and they burrow down under a great weight of quilts, piled deep, every cover the house owns spread over the beds now that there's no coal to spare for warming the sleeping room, and they double up for warmth, the way children in cold houses always have, a smaller one tucked in against a bigger one, sharing what heat their 2 bodies make, so that no one has to face all that cold alone. Grace goes down first and easiest, warm iron at her feet, and she's asleep almost before you have finished tucking the quilt around her small shoulders, because she isn't quite 4, and the day has used her all up, and she has that complete animal trust that the warm will keep coming as long as Ma is near. You settle Mary. For Mary, the coming of night is a gentler change than for the rest, because her dark doesn't deepen the way theirs does. The lamp going out takes nothing from her that she had, and there's a strange small mercy tucked inside that hard fact, one you have thought about more than once in the quiet. She isn't afraid of the dark. She lives there, and she has made her peace with it, and she lies down calm and says her goodnight in that even voice of hers and is easy. You smooth her hair back anyway, the way you have since she was small, because she can't see the gesture but she can feel it, and feeling it's the whole point. Carrie and Laura go down last, the older girls, still with a little talk left in them. A whisper and a stifled laugh passed between the quilts. The day's small events chewed over one more time in the dark. You don't hush them too hard. Let them murmur. It's the sound of children who feel safe, and a mother learns to love that particular sound, above almost any music. The low, easy back and forth of her own children, being drowsy and content in the next breath of the room. Prayers are said, the simple ones, the ones every child here has said every night of their remembered life, the same soft, familiar words that have followed this family through every house, in every state, so that a child falling asleep in a snowed-in town in Dakota is soothed by the exact cadence that soothed her in Wisconsin and Minnesota and on the open Kansas plain. There's deep comfort in a thing said the same way every single night. It tells the body before the mind can argue that the world is still in its right order, that tomorrow will come as all the tomorrows have, that Ma is here and the door is barred and all is well. One by one the whispers thin out, the breathing lengthens and evens, and the beds that were slabs of cold an hour ago are 5 warm nests now, each with a child safe down inside it, and the great weight that you carry through every waking hour, the weight of 5 lives held up against a killing winter, goes quiet for a while, though it never quite sets down. Now the house is yours, and the last chores of the day fall to the one who is always last. You move through the rooms in the small light, doing the things that must be done before you can rest. You check the door, the bar seated firm in its brackets, the wind still shouldering at it, and still, for tonight, denied. You see to the water, what there's of it, set where it won't freeze solid before morning, though a skin of ice on it by dawn is simply expected now. And you come, last of all, to the stove, for the single most important small task of the whole day, the one the entire next morning depends on, the banking of the fire. This is the quiet art on which everything turns. You can't keep the fire burning bright all night. There isn't hay enough in the world for that, and a fire left to roar untended is a danger besides. But you can't let it die, because a dead stove on a night like this means waking to a house gone lethally cold and starting from nothing with numb hands in the black. So you thread the needle between the two, you rake the good red coals together into a close heap, and you cover them over gently with a blanket of ash, banking them down, and the ash holds the heat in and starves the fire down to the barest, slowest, most patient burn, a red sleep rather than a death. Those buried coals will hold their small life through all the black hours, breathing so slowly you'd think them gone, waiting. And they will still be there, faithful, in the last black hour before the dawn, when a cold woman kneels down in the dark and opens the little door and breathes them back to flame, and the whole day begins again from that one kept ember. You bank the fire the way you do everything, with care, for the sake of a morning you can't yet see. The little coffee mill sits on its shelf above, emptied and ready, waiting for the hands that will take it up at first light, and the house, at last, goes still. There's 1 hour left, and it's the only one all day that belongs to you. You sit down. That by itself is worth marking, because you've been on your feet since before 4, and it's a strange soft shock every night. The simple act of lowering yourself into a chair with nothing left that must be done this instant. The button lamp burns its small, steady flame on the table beside you. The stove ticks as it settles, banked and low. The wind hasn't stopped. It never stops. But you have long since folded it into the silence, and under it you can hear the thing you sat down to hear, which is the sound of 5 people breathing in their sleep, warm and whole and safe and yours. All of them carried through one more day and set down gently on the far side of it. You let yourself feel the tiredness now, since there's no one awake to be steadied by your not feeling it. It's a deep tiredness, down in the joints and the marrow, the kind that sleep only takes the top off of. Your hands in your lap are a map of the winter, red and rough and split at the knuckles from the hay, and they ache in the particular way that means more of the same tomorrow. You do a little quiet arithmetic in the lamplight, because you can't quite help it, the arithmetic that's always running somewhere under your calm. How much wheat is left in the sack, how much hay in the pile, how many days at the rate you're going before the one runs to the other. The numbers are thin. They have been thin for weeks. You have made thin numbers stretch before, further than seemed possible, by will and care and the grace you lean on, and you'll do it again, because the only other choice is one you don't permit yourself to consider. So you fold the arithmetic up and set it aside for the night. It'll keep. It always keeps. Above you on the shelf, the little coffee mill waits in the dark, cool and empty and ready. In a few short hours, you'll take it down again and fill it and begin the long, slow turning that makes the bread that keeps them all another day. You look at it a moment, that small wooden box that has quietly become the most important object in your whole house. And I think, if you're anything like the woman the record remembers, you feel something almost like fondness for it. The way a person comes to feel about any humble tool that has stood by them in a hard time and not failed. It hasn't failed you, neither have your hands. Neither, when it came to it, has anything that truly mattered. You rise finally, because the morning comes whether you have slept or not, and the best thing you can do for the people in those beds is to be rested enough to be calm tomorrow. You take one last slow look around the small room, everything in its place, the door barred, the fire banked, the children down, the day complete, and survived. And then you lean over the button lamp, that little flame of grease and cloth and cleverness that has been your light through the darkest edges of this day, and you gather your breath and you put it out. The dark comes down over the house soft and complete and holds it, and everyone in it safe until the morning. Now, let yourself drift back over it, gently, the way you drift towards sleep, while the day we lived goes past one last time in pictures. You woke before 4 in a black cold room, and you didn't want to, and you rose anyway. You knelt at the stove and breathed a few buried coals back into flame, and the little fire threw the first light across the frost that had feathered white on the walls in the night. You broke the ice on the water bucket. You lit a lamp made of a button and a spoonful of grease, because that was the light you had, and it was enough. You took down a little coffee mill and turned it again, until a slow brown drift of flour lay in the drawer, because that was the bread, and there was no other. You laid a cloth on the table when no one on earth would have blamed you for letting it go. You twisted summer hay into hard sticks with cracked and stinging hands, and fed a hungry stove all day long, and once in a while a stick caught and gave you back the smell of July. You kept a blind girl in the world by describing it to her. You held a small far light out ahead of them, and never once let them believe there was no door. You measured a thin supper against a long winter, and made it somehow enough. And when the fiddle couldn't play, you sang. You got 5 people warm and safe and down into sleep, and you banked the fire for a morning you couldn't see, and last of all you put out your small brave light and let the dark hold you all. They were only people. That is the thing to hold at the end. Not statues, not saints, not a lesson in a book. Only people, cold and tired and frightened under the calm, hoping the wheat would last and the winter would break and the spring would come. Sure, somewhere underneath it all that they would be all right in the end, the way we all quietly go on being sure because we couldn't get up in the morning otherwise. And the spring did come, in the end. It always does. The snow that looked eternal softened and ran, and the trains came through at last, and the fiddle played again, and the little mill went back to grinding nothing but coffee, and the woman who had held 5 lives up through all of it set the whole winter down, and most likely hardly ever spoke of it again, because that was her way. And now you're back in your own bed, in your own warm and effortless house, where the heat comes up out of the wall by itself, and the water runs without a bucket, and the light waits behind a switch, asking nothing of you at all. You didn't have to breathe any coals back to life tonight. You don't have to rise in the dark. Whatever weight you carried into this evening, you're allowed right now to set it down, the way she set hers down, and let the dark keep you too. Rest easy now. The long winter is far away, 100 and more years gone, softened all the way down to a story, and the cold can't reach you, and the wheat will last, and the morning will come warm and easy without your lifting a single finger to make it. There's nothing left tonight that needs doing. There's nowhere you have to be but here, and no one you have to keep alive but yourself, and even that tonight is taken care of. Let your hands go loose, let the day go. Sleep now. Good night.